Welcome to the Personal Development Mastery Podcast. I am 𝗍𝗁𝗲𝗄𝗆 and my mission is to inspire you to grow, stand out, and take action towards the next level of your life. I interview leaders, authors, successful entrepreneurs, spiritual teachers, exceptional people who will inspire you to improve your life. Tune in for 2 episodes each week and make sure you subscribe to get them as soon as they are released. In today's show, I am delighted to speak with Francis Cholle. Francis, you are an international business consultant, having trained and worked with about 250,000 business students and executives. You are a Wall Street Journal and USA Today best-selling author, a keynote and TEDx speaker, as well as CEO and founder of the human company, SQUIRCLE Academy, and the Know Better World Foundation. You are passionate about helping companies adapt, innovate, and succeed, and helping leaders solve complex problems and thrive in disruption. Francis, I'm overjoyed to be speaking with you today. Welcome.
Thank you, Adi, and likewise, thank you very much.
Francis, I would like to start with asking you to give us a little bit of your background and your journey. So there were quite a few intriguing points that I discovered looking at your story, but there was one that I wanted to ask you about in particular. You say that when you were 25, you became a millionaire, and that changed your perspective on life and career. Would you like to take us back there and explain what changed? How did that change you?
Sure. So there were previous change to this, maybe, which is when I was, what age? 18, 19? 19, mm-hmm. Yeah, 19. When I was 18, I got into a business school. And I decided not to take it and to study again for 1 year to get in a better business school. Mm-hmm. So from number 3 to number 1, actually. Okay. And I don't even know why I did this, honestly. But I did it. And the reason why I'm saying this is because once you enter that school in France, you feel you've arrived. And I was at 19 of age. Okay, I don't know if I don't think it's a right thing, but I think it's a perception that we share when we enter that school. Okay, so that was one threshold, and then a few years later, so I stayed for 3 years, and then I did what's called a civil service in France. So I went to Germany for 1.5 years. I didn't really clearly knew what would be my path, so I went back to school for 1 year to be the assistant to a professor. And then I got the job I got, which was to be the managing director of a art book publishing house in Paris to do its turnaround because it was not profitable very much. It was going through difficulties. And early on had success. Very early on, the first 6 months, something really big happened. A big contract came in that I was able to nail for the company, and which represented a year margin of the business. Mm-hmm. And soon enough, I was offered to become a shareholder of the company to secure my position and my commitment to the organization. And I had a plan of acquisition against markers of shares, all the way to becoming one of the key shareholders of the organization. So that's why I became a millionaire very young, because we turned around the company quickly. Over 3 years, we doubled its size and made it the most profitable publishing house. So that was like a big achievement at a very young age, and that brought wealth. So now I'm coming from this business school, I have wealth. So I felt like something had been achieved very young, and I felt I had completed my journey as a businessman at 27. And I left for New York. So those have been very, I started my career as a small business co-owner, doing a turnaround and doing it very intuitively, instinctually, and of course a lot of thought and a lot of work involved, weekends and late nights. I had 2 jobs, actually, I can explain later, in the organization. But so I've had this very short, intense series of successes or relative successes and condense business life. And I felt like that was done at age 20, 28. Yeah.
And what did you do next then? You said that you went to New York.
I went to New York to find ideas about what would be next for me, because I always loved New York. I studied in New York when I was 18 at Columbia University for a summer. And I went back for my work as an art book publisher. New York was a big capital of the world of art book publishing. And I went there with a friend, and the idea was just to be inspired and find new ideas. I had a very intense 4 years, and honestly had not really taken much time to think about my life. And I was at that moment where I guess I was reevaluating. So I went there with the idea of creating a performing arts center, stage and music, but to help people to become more human, more happier, more whole. Not to create concert pianists and stars, but to create people who are more balanced, more happier, fuller with their lives. And when I arrived in New York, I said, oh, you know what? I'm not going to create that center. I'm going to live it. I'm going to experience it before I create it. So I joined an acting school where everybody wanted to become Robert De Niro, and I wanted to become Francis, myself. So that was a bit of a disconnect once more, but because the life I had between 24 and 28 was rather disconnected from most of my friends. I had big responsibilities, both in business, but also intellectually, because I had these two hats of learning the craft of becoming an art book publisher and learning the craft of leading a business.
That's great. And that's very, very interesting, because there is so much contrast between a business school and a stage. They are very, very on different sides, if there is a spectrum of different things. And there was something that I read, that you said that during the time you were on stage in New York, you learned something that you couldn't have learned in the business school, and that was I think it was the play and the creativity. So I wanted to ask you about this. So maybe use this as a transition to move on the conversation towards the SQUIRCLE. But I would really like to find out about this creativity and play, because you know very well they are so important, and also we know that many people really lack play in their life.
So before I go into this, Ajay, because we're going to go more into the methodology I developed, so I would like to tell your audience that I developed all of this based on an assignment that I received as a consultant, as I was still in the performing arts in New York, for the CEO of L'Oréal on the management of creative teams. So I'm not a scholar. I'm someone, so I don't have a PhD in the subjects that I talk about, but I've researched it quite heavily for L'Oréal, to the point that we developed training programs globally to help managers motivate creative teams and work with creative teams and manage creative teams better, because creativity is essential to L'Oréal, a global leading beauty group in the world. And since then, I've put to test the model I developed. As you said, 250,000 people have taken that assessment that I developed, and we've worked for more than 20 Fortune 500 companies in the past 15 years. And we've seen it work. It's kind of counter mainstream in the way we approach things, but it does deliver results. So I just want to share with you that I feel compelled to share what we do, and reasonably confident that it can be replicated by others, because I've even taught it to other consultants and coaches for them to use it. Mm-hmm. So this being said, what I discovered on stage is really the underpinning of performance, the underpinning of engagement, and the underpinning of creativity, and also probably a certain take on intelligence. So I developed the concept of intuitive intelligence, the synergy between our rational mind and our instinctual aptitudes. The rational mind is what we trained at school, mostly, being able to analyze a text, critical thinking, mathematics, the ability to reason in sophisticated theories and models. And the instinctual aptitudes are what we're born with, the ability to sustain our existence, as individuals and as a species. So that's how I understand those two terms. And the synergy between the logical mind and our instinctual aptitudes, create intuitive intelligence, a form of intelligence that I think is very much suited for the creative process and very much suited for the complexity of our times.
That's amazing, and the synergy that you say is something that I want to discuss a little bit later on. Can I bring us back a little bit and discuss the SQUIRCLE concept, because I found this extremely fascinating. I will share a little bit later my own personal result with the test, but I will ask you about the concept, if you would give me a definition. Before I do that, I will give a little bit of introduction by using a quote that I think is very relevant. It's something that Einstein said, and you have on your website, and I will just read it because I think it sets the tone very well for what you're going to tell me next. And so Einstein said that the intuitive mind is a sacred gift, and the rational mind is a faithful servant. We have created a society that honors the servant and has forgotten the gift. And what you were saying earlier about those two sides, and the one that is very much cultivated in our society, whereas the other one is not. I like very much this description of the gift versus the servant that are not treated as such. So I would love to hear your thoughts and guide us through the SQUIRCLE concept.
Okay, so why don't we start with a story, because I think it's easier to understand through stories.
Absolutely.
In the book I completed like a year ago, pretty much, called SQUIRCLE, a new way to think for a new world. I speak about a true story of an executive from Unilever by the name of Philip, who is a seasoned, experienced marathon runner, who that year has decided to run again the marathon in New York. And he shared that story one time when I was offering a presentation at a global executive search, who had decided to invite their key account executives and give me the floor to, offer them what we do and as a gift at the end of the year, or beginning of the year. Actually, it was in January. So Philip went through the methodology, which starts with a game by which people can realize that there's another way to solve complexity than the usual way of thinking. Mm-hmm. So anyway, so Philip's story is, and after he went through the experience, oh my God, that reminds me really strongly of something that happened to me, and hear what happened to him. So he sets out to run New York Marathon. So you probably know that because I know that you've run one recently, AG. Congratulations on this. You trained for 3 months. As you get closer to the race, of course, the discipline is even more important. In the case of Philip, the first 2 months had been able to train according to his plan, but the last month was much more difficult because of heavy travel. And the last week especially got really a bit crazy for him. And he didn't feel that he prepared himself as well as he had planned to. So he called his coach, Jennifer, and he said to her exactly what I told you. I'm not sure I'm ready. What should I do? And Jennifer, New Yorker, pragmatic, who usually is all about what's your performance? How did you sleep? What have you ate? How did you run? This time told him, listen, Philip, if your concern is to hurt yourself. Don't worry about this. You've trained very reasonably for this race. And second, you're a seasoned marathon runner. So your body is ready for that marathon. Now, given the unusual circumstances under which you will participate if you decide to participate, I would advise you to do two things. One, do not look at your watch throughout the race. And two, stay connected to your breathing. Really pay attention to your breathing. And Philip was kind of baffled, surprised, astonished by what she told him, because that was not her usual speak. Went home, decided to go to bed, not think about it, because he really didn't know what to make of it, and said he would decide the next day in the morning. So now he's having breakfast and he's thinking, you know what? I've trained. I love running. I love running the marathon of New York. It's a fabulous journey every time. I'm going to do it. And you know what? I would experiment. In other words, I'm not ready to do it the way I used to do it. So why not trying something else? Mm-hmm. And which is, by the way, what all of us go through today. We can't do things the way we used to do them, and we have to experiment. So he experimented. And it was hard for him to not look at his watch because, he's thriving on achievements, like all of us. He's thriving on strategy and goals and achieving those goals. So it was a battle, but he decided not to look at his watch. And then connecting with breathing was kind of also a very disciplined ask, to really stay in the moment and be physically present and everything. But he did. And what happened is he got his better score ever, his better time ever. So that really stunned him, and that stayed with him, and that impacted the way he was working after that, from that point on. And the game that we took him through and the model that I explained that I shared to explain what's happening in the game was very intriguing to him. I think made him understand better, deeper, and be able to make it more actionable, this knowledge, this understanding, for what he does at work in managing teams and managing himself. Mm-hmm. He's a Unilever executive. At the time, was an executive at Unilever in New York. Yeah.
Hi, it's Agi here, interrupting you with something you may find useful. The most frustrating feeling is when you're trying to focus, but you can't get your brain to concentrate and zone in on the important work in front of you. And if it happens to you, you are not alone. 40% of people say they have to make a big effort to concentrate. But if you're having trouble getting focused, I have a solution for you. I'm so excited to be partnering with Brain FM. Brain FM is a great app, and I use it to block out my mental chatter and zone in on my number one priority of the day. Brain FM uses functional music which is backed by science and research, and it is designed to give us that extra edge when we need our undivided attention. But they also have relaxation, meditation, and deep sleep modules that help you unwind and recharge. So if you want to be able to place your full attention exclusively in the activity you choose, whether that's meaningful work or relaxing or getting high quality sleep, right now, Personal Development Mastery Podcast listeners get 20% off Brain FM subscription at brain.fm/Agi. That's an amazing deal for such a great app. Thousands of people have given 5-star reviews to Brain FM. Find out why. brain.fm/Agi. If I were to ask you to bridge then this story with those two sides of the SQUIRCLE, can you elaborate a bit more?
Sure. So there are two approaches to running the race. So one is, I have a strategy, I have a plan, a strategy, I have got metrics, I got a process to get there, and I will stick to the strategy, stick to the process, and reach my goals. Mm-hmm. That's pretty much traditional thinking. That's what I learned at school. Okay. And And we can all relate to this. That's the milk that we grew up on. Okay. And then there is the other path, which is what happened to Philip. Something happens, that actually throws the plan out of the door.
Okay.
And then you have to adapt and make decisions. And in his case, he decided that he would focus on the experience, experiment like a scientist, identifying two aspects of the experience that he would do differently, and be willing to be surprised, be willing to not know, be willing to give up the outcome. Why? Because he finds himself in circumstances that are no longer the circumstances that he had planned ahead for. So what do you do when you're being surprised? What do you do when things don't go the way you thought they would be going for you to execute on strategy? He did what scientists do. Okay, I had a model. This model is no longer relevant because circumstances have changed. And that's what the scientist does. I think that the theory or the rules, the laws of physics, that we believed in are not enough to approach progress, evolution, or an intuition, a sensation I have that we could actually do better. I'm going to experiment. And scientific experimentation has very precise aspects to it, but also non-precise aspect to it. It's really about perception. It's about discovery. It's about being surprised. It's about being confused. And that's exactly what he went through. He allowed himself to be surprised. He was somewhat confused. He was challenged in the process of not looking at his watch, unusual, and being connected to his body. And what's interesting here is that he got a better score. He got a better time. And he felt better at the end of the race because his body was more relaxed, because he was breathing throughout the race. And he enjoyed himself more because he was present to the moment. So that speaks to burnout at work, low level of engagement, how to perform in a disruptive environment, how to pivot and adapt when things don't go the way you thought that it would be going and not going the way you had anticipated they would go as you have planned your strategy to reach your goals. So we can all relate to this thing. Now, if someone had done what Philippe did, would that person also get the better running time? I have no clue. But what I know is that Philippe allowed himself to go through a true experimentation, grew out of it, expanded his ways of understanding performance management, expanded his way of understanding how to adapt to unknown circumstances. And the cherry on the cake is that he had a better time, his body was less tired, and he got a better running time. And I have no clue to tell you, AG, if that would work for you or not. Okay, I know the principles are right, but the experience is unique because we're all unique. And that's why today, as we trailblaze through totally new avenues of how to do business, how to respond to the unknown and uncertainty, we're all placed in Philippe's shoes. And there are solid principles that we can operate from that will get us further, but not necessarily where we want to end up, okay? But there will be a gain. And if you are able to evaluate the process and look at it and learn the lesson you need to learn, you will eventually get to your goals.
Francis, I wanted to ask you one more thing about this, these two sides, the logical, the reason side, and the intuitive side, because you, and I'll come back to what you said about synergy earlier, which is a great way to use and both of them. However, I think in many people's eyes, these two sides seem to be like opposites. So I would like your thoughts.
Let me get to it. So, let's go back to Philippe, because that's a story. It's a simple situation that's really very much mirroring what we're all going through. Okay. the logical strategic path that we are all grown up with, okay, would have done two things. Either he would not have run and not gained any learning, or he would have run with this idea that he was not ready and probably forcing himself because psychologically he was battling the idea that he was not up to par.
Yes.
Okay? What would be the outcome? I cannot tell you. But most likely, he would not have had a more pleasant experience, a more relaxed body, and I don't know about the running time. Okay? But we know that his body would have been less under duress, has been less under duress than if he had gone there with the stress that I am not fit, I'm not ready, I've not done what I was supposed to do, and I'm going to force my strategy through in spite of this.
Yes. Or
I give up strategy and goal and I'm experimenting with something else. So this is where we need to really understand one thing. The let's say the intuitive aspect, the improvisational aspect, where you maneuver through intuition. He decided intuitively to run. It was not based on facts. He said, that's interesting what he's offering. I can consider it. I can venture. I can experiment. So was really staying in the process and not focusing on the outcome. So you are really present to what's happening and you orientate yourself through your sensations, your perceptions, what you feel. That doesn't deny logic. It enriches logic. Mm-hmm. Okay? Because all along he's been thinking, but he's not let his strategic mind, his logical mind, dominate his experience. He made space for the logical mind to be with him, but not dominating his availability to the experience from a physical, sensorial place. Whereas on the other hand, had he dominated with the logical mind, I'm going to push through, I'm going to stay on strategy, I'm going to reach my goal, okay? That approach would have kept him in his head and not being present to the experience, not being present to his physiological needs, and his body, because I've had many, many talks with many marathon runners, his bodies would have actually paid the price for his forceful approach, where the mind would be set on what it wants and pushed through no matter what. And in a world where disruption is the new normal, we need to understand that it's not disruption in the sense, oh my God, I'm going to fail if I'm not up to disruption. It's I'm asked to navigate with a different awareness, with a different way of thinking, which includes logic, which includes measures, but doesn't dominate through logic and measures, which is very hard in business, of course, and especially hard in public organizations that are publicly traded with quarterly reporting, etc., which is different than small businesses, obviously. But what's hard for small businesses is that we believe that the harder we work, the more results we'll get. And what Philip's story points to is that there's another path. It's not either I'm not ready or I'm ready. Is I am where I am, and I'm going to experiment, being present to my circumstances, both in a logical way, in a perceptual way. And it's going to be an interesting, richer experience by which I can stay being rational and fact-based, but not limiting myself to what I see, what I know, and being open to experiment. Yeah. So that's what SQUIRCLE does. It reconciliates those two approaches and enables a synergy. So synergy means that the two approaches, the logical, strategic one, and the more perceptual, improvisational one, could interact with one another so that coming together, being respected for what they are, both of those approaches, they interact and they create more than the sum of those two. Let me give you a simple example. Scientific medicine, medical science, cannot reconciliate with traditional medicine like Chinese medicine. Two different logic. they can't reconciliate from a logical point of view. From the medical science framework, it's not adding up. However, today, in many hospitals, and some of the greatest, the Mayo Clinic in America, for instance, they will integrate acupuncture prior to anesthesia, post anesthesia. They will incorporate acupuncture in trauma management, in pain management. Okay, so they cannot understand from a medical science what traditional medicine adds to patients, but they see experientially, through experiments, through experience, experientially, that it adds value. It accelerates the healing. It makes the patient heal faster, get out of the sick bed faster. So they've integrated it, and they allow those two disciplines, which cannot be reconciled, logic and intuition, or medical science and traditional medicine, but let them interact by not trying to understand, but letting knowledge and experience lead them, and reap the benefits of both, without opposition, without exclusion, in a holistic manner. When you look at those two treatments as a whole, and let them interact, those two treatments, to create better outcomes. So that's exactly what SQUIRCLE offers, allowing Philippe to be both strategic, trained, applied, disciplined, and at the same time open to experimentation, so that he can reach beyond what the logical mind can understand, and have access to performance boosters, in his case, higher level of well-being, and for higher level of performance.
That's great. So let's say that someone who's listening to this now has much more weight into the rational part of his decisions, as I suppose most people are, and they would like to tap more into the other side, the intuitive side. Is there what would you recommend for
So it's actually quite straightforward, because we practice intuition and our instinctual gut feeling all day long. It's deconstructing the way we make decisions, okay, and holding the space for both. So yes, there is strategy. Yes, there is goals. We all have to have them in the world we live in, okay? So it's really not about discounting this or throwing this out the window at all. It is about enriching, adding with, what do I truly feel? How do I truly feel about this situation? On paper, it makes sense. But is it exactly what I feel inside? You need to take stock of what you feel about any situation. This contract in Japan, this new product launch and campaign, this new client that's coming into our roster and seems to be like, oh my God, such a big opportunity. Okay, so how do I really truly feel, and take stock of this, and let this inform you. If you have a question that you cannot answer with a black and white analysis, then let it inform you. Don't give up the question, say, oh, I don't have the time. On the contrary, there's something here that doesn't add up. I'm not sure of what it is. Let my brain, myself, stay with it. So I hold on to the question. But I don't think about it from an obsessional place of, I need to have the answer. I let the answer come to me. So it's just a matter of changing the attitude from will to openness. Determination and openness versus will and forcefulness. And that makes a huge difference. Why? Because suddenly you have access to a reservoir of perception and intelligence that you cannot have access to if you stay in the will and the forcefulness.
That's fantastic. And yes, this intelligence, this deep intelligence is amazing. There was something I want you to elaborate a bit more. You said to ask yourself, how do I feel?
Yeah.
what kind of answer should one expect from that? So how, when you say feel, is it a physical sensation? Is it I feel light? I feel, how do you...
Physical sensation, absolutely. The body doesn't lie. You know, the body doesn't lie. So it doesn't lie, but it will send you messages that are not explicit.
Yes.
Okay. So you have to make sure that you are open to the messages that the body sends to you. And you need to revisit your vocabulary in making sense of that message, you know, because your grammar, your syntax, your vocabulary is of another order. You know, you won't be able to make sense of it. But, you know, the funny part, AG, is that I advise, you know, global CEOs of global organizations and their teams. And I don't know one single CEO, he or she, that doesn't do that, exactly what I say. Okay, and they do it very quickly. There's research that say that CEOs, a long time research I found for my first book that I wrote in 2000, that was published in 2007. I wrote in 2005, 16 years ago. But the research was saying that leaders prefer to make a decision quickly than not make a decision, because they know that in 80% of the cases, they'll be right from experience, okay? Because they're seasoned, because they have experts' advice around them, because they've, you know, learned their craft over decades and so on and so forth. So they do this, they do that. I don't know one single leader, successful leader, who's not, you know, making, let's call them like holistic judgments, holistic decisions, meaning facts, analysis, experience, and some other dimensions that it cannot really put in a box, that it cannot necessarily represent intellectually or logically, but that informs very astutely their decisions. Now, the problem in organization is that you can do that with yourself because you trust yourself. How do you do this with teams? Okay, because it's not only you trust yourself, but you trust this process, this intuitive process, because you've gone through it within your own inner dialogue, but you don't partake in inner dialogues of your associates at work and team members. So that's why it becomes very difficult. How do I replicate this inner dialogue within teams when it's something that's so ethereal, so not, you know, tangible, where everybody has their own vocabulary and syntax and grammar to engage with those inner perceptions? So that's why there's a huge deficit. This is where we come in and we help organization actually create circumstances by which that perceptual intelligence that everybody has can be honored in group decision, in teamwork. But the irony is that this language of the body is universal. Our unique relationship to this body, our relationship to this body language, universal body language, is unique, but the language itself is universal. So when you get people to play games, serious games, you know, that universal language becomes much more obvious, tangible, and because the mind, when you play, the mind is not in the way. You know, you just play, you're in the moment, you're immersed, just like Philip, not looking at his watch, enjoying the moment, being present to his body, you know, shifted into a different quality of presence. So that's the same quality of presence that you have when you play. It's been researched by scientists all over. We're never more human than when we play, and more whole than when we play, and more full of potential, activated than when we play. So that's how this collective intelligence, you know, can be surfaced and deliver results like no time before. I worked at a company in Chicago, 60-year-old business, Midwest technology company with a CFO group, very exact people, okay? In less than 8 hours, we came up with many different things, but one of them was the vision for that financial group, okay? And everybody like, oh my God, you know, they really came up with a vision that was so clear, so clean, 7-8 words, so powerful, so engaging, you know. They were surprised. And yes, I pushed, yes, I challenged the process and everything as a consultant, but I told them it's not of me, it's of the group emergence process. You know, that something of that quality was able to happen because you're very seasoned professional, you know what you do, and you know what you aspire to, And that's just surfaced because people were very open to this process of emergence, which is the process of nature.
That's fascinating. And I think anyone that has experienced this intelligence, this higher intelligence, and receives an answer or an idea from it, knows exactly what you're talking about.
You know, I would not say superior intelligence because that creates a hierarchy and we're back into strategy and goals. Okay, I would say a deeper intelligence.
Deeper, okay.
Yeah, an intelligence that we cannot have access through the logical mind, which stays at the surface, you know, and at the surface is very, 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 very powerful. You know, it created science, you know, it's very powerful and needs to be respected, obviously, and understand its limits. And every great scientific researcher gets that. Every great entrepreneur gets that. Every great leader gets that. Now, the difficulty is how do you orchestrate this in an organization where you don't work alone, you work with other people? How do you invite this? How do you make that actually a norm, you know, of how you work? And how do you encourage it? That's a challenge because that's not the way we've been trained. This is not where we feel comfortable. It requires a deeper involvement.
Absolutely. Francis, let me ask you also, I would like to ask you some quick fire questions to start wrapping this conversation up. It's been fascinating so far. So the first one I always ask my guests is, what does the term personal development mean to you?
You know, I was having a conversation with this client actually in the past few days. Personal development or professional development or talent development, to me, it has to be at every level of the value creation chain, of the value chain today. Because, you know, that sentence that I heard from somebody from a financial group, you know, the new skill set is the new mindset. And the new mindset needs to be shaped at every touch point of value creation for companies to really be adaptive as they need to be adaptive. Yeah. So
amazing. And a hypothetical question, let's say you could go back in time and meet your 18-year-old self. What's one piece of advice you would tell him? Relax.
It's going to be okay. Relax.
I'm smiling because I've heard this kind of answer in different words from so many times. It's a common theme. Francis, emerging from this conversation we had, if you were to give to the listener one actionable item, something to take away and implement, what would you tell him or her?
Yeah. So experimentation is a must today. You know, when you enter the jungle, you know, you can't orientate yourself the way you used to. So you have to experiment with the first step. And no first step is going to be easy. And neither the second one and the third one, because you're in the jungle, everything can happen. So you need to develop that experimentation muscle. So what I do with my clients, I tell them, okay, let's experiment in a low-hanging fruit, in something that's not too big of a risk. But with a real risk, with a small stake. Because it needs to be real, okay? You need to be facing the real dragons, okay? Of, wow, I don't have control. You know, I will say that no one has control. You know, we only have the illusion of control. So we're not giving up much, but emotionally we give up a lot, okay? Psychologically and emotionally we give a lot. So experiment with not having control, improvising, and perceiving what's happening so you can develop that muscle, that channel of knowledge, in a way that will serve you for bigger stakes. So start small and smart, but do start experimenting because this is the way forward.
Perfect. Fantastic. Where would you direct people who want to find out more about you, Francis? What's the best place?
So, you know, my first and last name, 𝗁𝗂𝗆𝐶𝗁𝗆.com. You know, that's one website. But I would like to send your listeners to SQUIRCLEAcademy.com and to take the test. There's a simple free assessment that will provide some customized insights about their responses and also other insights about their team members and people around them, whether it's clients, whether it's spouses, or whether it's children or teammates, workmates, or again, vendors, clients also. So it's a 24-page report and it's free. And I would like to say one thing. We're much more complex as human beings than any assessment could really honor. So it's not an assessment. It's a conversation starter. For everybody who answers those questions, it takes 3 minutes to reflect on how they approach life. The square approach is absolutely fine. The circle approach is totally fine. The problem we have is we live in a society where we dominate with the square, as opposed to enable the square and the circle to function on an equal foot. And that's where the opportunity lies. So it's not like the square are bad because they're too structured and too strategic. No, not at all. It's fabulous. Everybody needs to know what's on their bank account and how to manage their money, what's the return on their investment. And the circle needs to be freed, because if you put the circle, if you dominate a circle with a square, imagine the image of a circle within a square. It's boxed in. It's like a wild animal in a cage. A wild animal, a wild bird in a cage is no longer a wild bird. It becomes an object of decoration. It loses its capacity to adapt and thrive in nature, okay, and thrive in the unknown, in uncertainty. So that's really the point of SQUIRCLE. Liberate the circle from the square and let them interact together. So go to SQUIRCLEacademy.com, and you'll see in the menu, take the test, and you'll get hopefully interesting insights in this way forward that we all have to onboard.
Can I second that? And I will say very quickly that I did take the test myself, and you know that the test is very good when the first sentence that you read in the results makes you realize, oh my, this is me. This is a very accurate description. So yeah, it's a great test. I will put it on the show notes as well. Francis, I want to thank you very much for your time and a truly fascinating conversation I had with you today. You shared some incredible things that I believe have immense value for the listener. So thank you very much. Any last parting words from you?
The last parting words? Well, thank you very much. As a human being thrown into the unknown like everybody else, and having to adapt and pivot, don't judge yourself in that space. I think that's the biggest gift, to not judge ourselves in that space, the same way as you would not judge a beginner, starting to play tennis, or you would not judge a child learning the alphabet. We're all beginners today, in that new space.
I hope you enjoyed listening. If you have, please share this episode with someone who you think will benefit from it. If you want to know more about what I do, visit my website 𝗍𝗁𝗲𝗄𝗆.com. And until next time, stand out, don't fit in,